Hey friends, what's going on? It's Mike from Go Cell Phone Repair for the weekly Monday afternoon tech debrief. I don't know, we'll call it whatever we like, but a lot of stuff going on you might be interested in hearing about. Today we're going to be talking about Apple, who will be replacing batteries for free on some MacBook Pro models, cops that go to a funeral home and attempt to unlock a phone with a dead man's fingerprint. What? Yeah. Apparently this really happened. I have verified sources on this. Moto G6 and E5, as we know Motorola is now Lenovo. Sports teams are using facial recognition to learn more about their fan bases. That's kind of strange. And of course, popular YouTuber says that Apple won't fix his damaged iMac Pro that he messed up while he was working on it. Shocker, but the reason why is kind of interesting. So we'll get into that right after this. Quickly, I wanted to mention this to everyone out there because, up front, I think that the most important thing that we can really do is get information to consumers, technicians, business owners, anyone that can benefit by something that's happening right now. And this is a big one. This is Apple, who is offering a free battery replacement on some MacBook Pro units. Now, I went in, entered my serial number. It says I'm not eligible, so obviously I wasn't affected. These are the 13-inch models, by the way, so I had to go through the article a bit, and I had already, just immediately went to the website, punched my in, and I would recommend you do the same thing no matter what type of device you're using. If it's an Apple laptop and there's a possibility that there might be some free replacement of a battery or anything else on it, why not? If you have that option, if you had an iPhone 6s, if you had whatever, if it's not too much of a headache to you, and this would be a decent one because if they're going to put a new battery in there for you, it's going to be an OEM battery, which, obviously there was a problem with this one, so hopefully they've worked out whatever that issue is. And they said that there was actually a failed component. These are models that were manufactured between October 2016 and October 2017, so also you can put that serial number in and find out what the date code is. But if you go to their website, I'll link it here. And another idea that I thought might work out, let me see if I can find the link here. So I thought what might work out better in the future, probably going forward, is I'm going to link some of these into the chat directly so that anyone who's watching this, and hopefully during the replay it still works, you can just go and say, oh, where's this link at? There it is. It's right in the chat box. Now there are going to be multiple links because obviously I want to do two things, and one of them is to send you guys to the right place to check on your battery status. The other one is to acknowledge the source from where my information is coming for a couple of reasons. One, we want to make sure that this is legitimate, and secondly, give credit to whoever came up with this information, because obviously I didn't write this, I only read the article. So this is off of TechCrunch, and the first link that I put on there, Apple support, go in, check out your serial number. You can tell your customers the same thing, if you want. I think it's always in our best interests to let people know when something like this happens. If someone comes into my store and they have one of the affected models, I'm going to tell them, there's a problem with this battery. Ash, I don't know where that came from. Apple is offering to replace the battery for you for free. Now, we can also do the replacement for you. That's an option, but I'm never going to hide, something that I feel like this company owes their customers. If they messed up, there's a defect, there's a recall, whatever, I'm certainly going to inform my customers about it. And then if they say, well, I don't have time to mess with the Apple Store, you're already working on my machine, can you replace the battery? Absolutely. So that way, we do a couple of things. We do what's best for the customer, and when it comes to loyalty, I think that's a big factor, and I believe that this is what a lot of companies struggle with out there is, hey, I have a potential to make money, but I could also say this, and if you don't spread that information out there, then that kind of ends up making you look like the bad guy, and really it's a battery, so whatever. And you're going to have a customer that's going to come back to you in the future and say, hey, last time this happened, you gave me great advice, and I would assume that in the future you're going to do the same thing, and this is how we build those relationships. Anyways, way off on that tangent. So interesting, the whole battery thing though in general, and I've been reading so many articles about lithium-ion batteries and the fact that the technology hasn't changed that much. Over time, there are a few minor differences, between the original lithium-ion and the lithium polymer batteries, but for the most part, we still have a lot of issues with these things just expanding over time. In fact, I have a bin, and most of you who have repair shops have a bin, hopefully an airtight one, where you store all of your bad batteries that are leaking lithium-ion gas into wherever they may be. So this has been I want to say as far back as I can remember, Motorola, BlackBerry, Samsung, Apple, obviously. All of these companies using the same technology, all of these companies still occasionally experiencing problems with certain models and certain designs, but also over time, just the fact that we, oh, my table shakes, just the fact that we can kind of expect lithium batteries to always expand eventually. And if they get too big and they rupture, then they're releasing who knows what into the atmosphere. And that's before they even go into the landfill. So I think it's time that someone, hopefully, comes up with a better option. And we keep hearing every few years about, oh, there's this great new battery technology. It has unlimited charging cycles, or it's so much more efficient than lithium ion. And then we never really see that come to market, at least not yet. And I'm sure there are many commercial and political reasons why that hasn't happened, but hopefully that changes sometime in the near future. Until then, claim your free battery if you have one coming to you, for sure. I would absolutely do that. You're going to just re-up your battery life from the beginning, which is a great thing for any device. All right, so this is the one that just blew my mind, and I saw this yesterday on another media source, which I didn't want to quote it because I wasn't sure how legitimate this was. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this link as well, and we'll see how this works out. This is an experiment I'm trying, rather than just putting things in the video description, because hopefully people will be more likely to go to the chat and follow these links, and you can read the article for yourself. But cops in Tampa, I think it was, it's definitely, yeah, so Tampa Bay Times reported that they think that these police maybe didn't want to opt for the gray key or Cellebrite options for unlocking a phone that was involved in an investigation. And if you don't know the backstory, there are different perspectives on what happened, but as far as I can gather from this is that the guy was driving with tinted windows in his car, which apparently was a rental, which is bizarre. So maybe he came from a state where you can have windows tinted, and he was driving around in a place where he's not supposed to do that. I don't know. And with many of these, because they're still in the stages of determining exactly what happened, there are stories on both sides, so it's hard to know exactly what went down. But the backstory is the guy got pulled over for tinted windows. When they stopped the car, he had a smell of marijuana coming from inside the car, and at some point decided to take off. So one story says that the officer was kind of halfway inside the window. The guy started to take off. The officer feared for his life and shot the guy 4 times. He's dead, obviously. And the other side of the story says that he did not move the car until after he was shot, or that the car never moved until he was shot. Then another story said he was trying to pin the officer against the wall or some barricades. So we don't really know, obviously. We weren't there. We didn't see it. But something happened. And in this process, the suspect, or the person who was pulled over, was shot. He died. He went to a funeral home, and as part of their investigation on a related case, and this guy's got quite a criminal history according to this article. They said that he's got, I want to say, multiple offenses, possibly felonies if I remember correctly. But in any case, that I don't think is really the issue. The question isn't what the history of that person is. The fact of the matter is there's an investigation underway. So they're trying to determine, they're trying to recover information from this phone. And what really comes into play here is the stance on rights, privacy rights, and information that belongs to someone when they're deceased. So we're not talking about a debate where someone's in court, or someone is being arrested, or someone's pulled over, and an authority wants to get into this device to recover information. That's a completely separate issue. We're talking about someone who's deceased, and the argument is made that once you're deceased, you don't have that right to privacy. You don't really have any rights because you're not alive anymore. And whether or not you're a criminal, whether you're innocent or guilty, that at least one position on this is that you're not alive anymore, so these rights don't apply. And I'm certainly not gonna pick a side. I'm curious about what the outcome of this case and what kind of precedent that sets for the future. That's my main curiosity here. Hey, Dave, how's it going? So what happens, and the funny thing here, and I may be completely off on this, but to the best of my knowledge, you cannot, I know this is really graphic, but if you just have someone's finger and that's it, and it's not attached to the body, my understanding is that at least for Apple's current technology, the fingerprint scanner doesn't do you any good. This is what I've been told, that these things are sophisticated enough to detect whether or not it's really a finger's a person's finger attached to their hand, you know, with blood still circulating through the capillaries, and it can tell the difference between that and, let's say, a fake or prosthetic, anything that's made up with the fingerprint embedded into it. Now, I haven't been able to prove that. I haven't seen it proven, but this is my understanding of how the technology works. So if that's the case, then you would think that anyone who is involved in this investigation would know that there would be no point in going into a funeral home, which obviously is going to be a huge issue for the family of that deceased person. You know, they're not here to say anything about it, but if you're at a funeral, or you know someone, or you have a friend or a family member or someone who's in a funeral home, anything like this is just going to be disturbing, to say the least, you know. And ultimately, if this led to excavating graves in order to get fingerprints to unlock phones or tablets or anything else that's involved in some sort of criminal investigation, things could get very strange. So I will be following this. I'm curious to see what happens with it, which direction it goes, and what implications that will have in the future. You know, there doesn't seem to be any law against doing something like this. It's obviously a moral concern for a lot of us, you know, definitely for the people involved, for the family of this person. So bizarre, and I'm most concerned when it comes to passcodes, fingerprint scanning, you know, security in general is this. If one person can do it, you know, the same with the gray shift issue. If there's a machine or a Cellebrite or anything out there that can bypass the security on a device, you have to imagine that at some point that will no longer be profitable to sell only to law enforcement, or only to authorized personnel, or only within the company. And someone's going to say, this could make me a lot of money if I sell this technology, or if I sell this equipment. And that's my main concern here, is that if we come up with ways to get past this security, it's only a matter of time before the wrong people have access to that. You know, whether it's criminals, whether it's repressive governments, you know, you name it, it could be anyone out there, someone who wants to extort money from you. If they're able to get to that information that you think is secured, then this could be a huge problem. So that's one of the main reasons why this is such an interesting case for me. Also, I would like to know how this technology works, you know, because if you remember on the iPhone 5S, they took a cast of a fingerprint and they put it on top of another person's finger, and they were able to unlock the code. And this was within days after the phone was released. So obviously that was the very first iteration that we had from Apple for fingerprint scanning technology. I would assume that it has evolved since then, but to what point, I don't really know. I don't use it myself. I don't know, for whatever reasons, it's in an awkward location. I don't really like putting my fingerprint into a private corporation's whatever, whether it's secure enclave, database, wherever it goes. You know, I really don't think they need that. I'm cool with the code, but a lot of people use this mechanism. So what happens long term with it? Hard to say, but certainly if you're asleep and someone has your phone and they can get it under your fingerprint scanner, I believe it's safe to say that they can unlock your phone. And asleep could also be unconscious, right? So you could be in bed, someone could, whatever, be in your house. I just realized I made a typographical error on my ticker, darn it. One definite technical mistake tonight. You can count it for me. In any case, use alphanumeric passcode. I think at least Apple Reader checks for blood flow in the finger. That's what I remember also, Greg, and I can't even remember the source where I found it, but I do remember reading something about that, which is great. But again, if you're asleep or unconscious or under duress, that circulation is still going to be going there. So obviously, you know, this would not apply in this case because the guy, the person is deceased at this point. But you think that everyone would have known this, you know, that would be common knowledge. This model iPhone, can we do this? Yes or no? Before you go into a funeral home, I would have thought, but maybe, you know, maybe there was a time sensitivity here. You know, maybe he was about to be buried. I don't know exactly. They don't really go into that in the article, but whatever it is, definitely disturbing for any family members or friends who might have been present or involved or have knowledge of this. Just creepy, I guess, overall. I'm going to will my fingers and eyes to my... Hey, you know, actually, Harvey, I don't know what your plans are, but if you're not an organ donor, some people also get creeped out by that, which I totally understand, but that's my intention when I go. If you can do something with any of this and help someone out, it's on my driver's license, so hopefully it'll go to good use. Harvey, if you do will your fingers to me, I will attempt to unlock an iPhone and read your fingerprint and see if that works. Oh, that would be weird. I'm not going to do that, but freaky stuff. You know, and just something that 20 years ago, I don't think anyone would have imagined that this would be in question. Maybe, you know, maybe Orwell, or maybe someone who was following that story, or his view of the future might have thought the same thing. In any case, here it is. All right, so let's talk about this briefly. We have new model phones from Motorola. And in fact, I've got a Motorola sitting on my desk right now that I have on a universal charger, which I'm going to show you next week how I did this. So if you guys already have those little Cassie or Casey charging stations for iPhones where you can just set the battery down on and charge it, you know, out of the phone, those are okay. Obviously, the limitation on them is that they only work with certain model iPhones, and they only work on iPhones unless you modify them. You can actually build chargers into that. It's another project I've got on the back burner right now. But a lot of times we come across these oddball batteries that, oh, gosh darn it, I wish I could show you guys this. I will post a photo on the website afterwards. In any case, we have these universal chargers, and what you can do is just attach a couple probes. In fact, if I have one, hang with me for just a second. I'm going to grab a wire off of my shelf here and hopefully not knock this rigging down in the process. One of these days, I think that you may see me on live stream fails if I don't get these lights mounted up a little better. So if you haven't seen these before, they are quite helpful, and it's going to be transparent on my background. But you see these little guys, they clip on. So if you take a couple of these, and they come with two. It doesn't look right, does it? It's all transparent no matter where I put it. Shouldn't have grabbed yellow, Mike. But if you take a couple of these little deals, let's do it up here. Take a couple of these, cut them off, strip the wires down, and you can attach, you can basically solder one of these wires onto each of the terminals on the universal charger. And then you can clip this onto quite a few different batteries. Now, they don't work very good with iPhone batteries because those things are so tiny on the inside. But with a lot of the other brands that you'll get, it's easy enough to attach them directly to the battery so you can charge the battery outside the phone. So if you have a situation where maybe the charging port's broke and all you want to do is charge it up enough to recover data, or whatever the situation may be, those come in really handy. And I've been planning to make a video demonstrating that as well, but it's pretty straightforward. You just solder two ends to your universal charger on each terminal and then use these leads to clip on. So I've got a battery sitting on there right now. And the thing about Motorola that I've never understood if you've worked on their phones is that the back side of the tab behind the battery, every time, if you're not super careful prying that thing off, they always break at the back side. There's kind of a loop that goes around the edge. And this one that I inherited as a repair had already been damaged, so I went to pry it off and the thing just fell apart. And they typically still work, but I don't understand why Motorola makes those things so frail. Like they just don't want to come off clean no matter which angle you're coming from, and you can't really go on the other side of the flex cable because it's underneath the panel that you have to remove, and you want to disconnect the battery beforehand. In any case, in all the tech news, again, we have Moto G6, we have Moto G6 Play, and we have a Moto G6 Plus. I don't know if this is going to create any excitement for anyone. I hope that it does. I hope that Motorola makes some sort of comeback. I've always been a fan, and they haven't been able to really grow too much here in the US. Now, a lot of this looks like it is targeted towards India, so this is part of their plan, as far as I can tell, is to sell these things outside the country. Hopefully we'll be seeing them here in the US. Here is the article. This is actually on Gadgets.NCTV. So the Moto G6, what are we looking at? The G6 Plus has a 5.93 inch Full HD Plus with 18:9 aspect ratio, runs on 2.2 gigahertz octa-core Snapdragon 630, which seems strange because isn't everything like 645 at this point or better? 4 gigs of RAM, dual camera setup with a 12 megapixel primary and secondary 5 megapixel sensor. Wow, an 8 megapixel camera on the front, comes with 64 gigs of storage and a 3200 milliamp battery, and it doesn't say anything about different options on the storage there, so I assume it's one size and that's what you get. And it's placed at 299 euros, whatever that is in US, because they don't have that converted here for me. So you might have to look that up if you, I don't know off the top of my head, I'd have to check. They have a Motorola G6 with a 5.7 inch. So from 5.93 down to 5.7, Same specs for the most part, it looks like, although it's got a no, not the same specs. Powered by 1.8 gigahertz octa-core Snapdragon 450 SoC and 3 gigs of RAM. So they're definitely not setting any records when it comes to performance in the way of processing here. Similar dual rear facer with 12 megapixel primary, 5 megapixel secondary, and an 8 megapixel front camera. Comes with 32 gigs of storage, 3,000 milliamp battery, and $249. That says dollars, so I assume that's in US. And then they have the smaller Moto G6 Play, which is a 5.7, which is the same as the Moto G6. So how is that the most pocket friendly? I'm not following that. Although it has a 5.7 inch display, I mean, we're getting to that part. 18.9 aspect ratio. It's running HD plus resolution instead, and there's a 1.4 octa-core Snapdragon 430, 3 gigs of RAM, 32 storage, and single 13 megapixel on the back. So there's one less camera on the back of the G6 Play, 8 megapixel on the front. The highlight is the 4,000 milliamp battery, priced at $199. Again, this says in dollars. So for $200, you get a phone with a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, and with a relatively slow processor. I would assume that this thing is going to last a long time on a single charge. That's probably the biggest benefit there. Obviously, you're going to sacrifice on one of the rear-facing cameras. I'm not sure how big of a deal that is to everyone. I have a lot of people who want to have the latest, greatest camera on their phones. I have to say, at least for my purposes here, my Galaxy S6 and iPhone 7 are probably more than YouTube even needs at this point. I mean, I know we can all go 4K, and that will be the future when people have the capability of streaming that. But if you're looking at a video or a still image on a phone screen, I mean, how high do you really want the resolution to be? And of course, if you're doing something, whether it's over your network or over a Wi-Fi connection through your ISP, how much how much high def material do you want to stream or download? That's my biggest question. So I'm not really sure that we're there on having to have 4K everything or whatever comes after 4K. But if you're looking for a good battery, this looks like it will do the trick, and I would assume these things are durable. That's what we like about Motorola most of the time, and probably not a lot of fun to work on, but we'll find out. Along with the G6, Motorola has also unveiled the E5 series for entry level, and these things do not yet have a price announced. E5, E5 Plus, and E5 Play positioned below the respective G6 models. So these things look like they're going to be even less expensive. And of course, that always brings in to play the fact that, you know, if your phone is under 200, let's say if your phone is under $200 brand new, how much would you ever want to spend to repair it, right? I mean, unless you're recovering data, once you get below a certain price point, and I'm talking, we have customers that come in with $700 phones, and they will opt for a $75 screen replacement instead of a $100 screen replacement, and they'd rather go with an aftermarket replacement part rather than an original from the manufacturer to save $25 to service a $700 phone. So, you know, for whatever that means, you know, we often run into a situation where someone has that same phone and it's going to cost $150 to replace, and they decline the repair because they would rather put that money towards another phone, which if you're upgrading, that's cool. If there's a trade-in program, you know, if there's some way to get some of the money back out of that device, that's fine. That makes sense if you're upgrading in, you know, either way. But my response is usually if it's a $700 phone and you're trading it in, make sure that you're getting a reasonable trade-in value on that thing. You know, if it's $150 to get it back to being worth, let's say $500, then your trade-in value should be at least $350 towards what it is you're purchasing. And unfortunately, for whatever reasons, we don't get a lot of people who follow us on the math, you know, and I think there's a bit of that brand new shiny device effect. Once you get in, you know, you get to the Apple store, you get to Best Buy, or you get to Amazon, or wherever it is that you happen to be buying from, and you get to purchase the latest model that there is, and that's kind of the only thing on your mind is I'm getting the iPhone 10 or I'm getting the Galaxy S9 Edge. So if they're only going to give me whatever amount of money for my old phone, that's cool. I just want the latest, greatest. And it's unfortunate because a lot of that money gets wasted. A lot of that trade-in value gets wasted. Obviously, the companies are going to make a profit one way or another on those devices that get turned in. and hopefully they're going to be repaired and used for warranty replacements and not thrown into a landfill somewhere, although, you know, oftentimes that's what's going to happen. That's something probably to save for another discussion, but definitely one worth addressing, and that is, in my opinion, quite frequently, repair is greater than recycling. And that's the odd thing, is that we've got into this state of mind that doing the right thing for the planet. Why don't we have chat in here? What am I doing here? Let's get over here. There we go. And let's get our display. Okay. I can't believe I forgot that this entire time. So, you know, I remember this. I think I've told this story before. I worked for a paper company. I worked in an office supply store. I didn't work for a paper company. I worked in an office supply store, and I can't tell you how many times someone would come in, and we had recycled green paper. So we sold it by the case. You know, this big case of paper that people would print on. And we had the regular kind of paper. We had all sorts of different varieties of printable paper. And then we had recycled paper that came in the green box. And people would regularly come in and say, I need a case of paper. And I'd say, step right this way. We have this case of paper. Let's just pick a random number. This case of paper is $19.99. And they would say, well, don't you guys have recycled paper? And I would say, absolutely. Right over here, we have the recycled paper, and it is $23.99. And guess what? Almost, I want to say 1 out of 10 people might go ahead and buy the recycled paper. Everyone else, oh, it's $3 more. Well, give me the other stuff that we don't care, you know, that's not concerned with the environment. So a lot of that mentality, I think, persists, number one. Secondly, recycling can be a good thing, but in many cases, recycling doesn't mean exactly what most people think that it does. You know, when they say green or earth-friendly or anything like that, a lot of this stuff doesn't end up getting taken apart, disposed of properly, repurposed, reused. A lot of times it gets stripped. People take out anything that's useful, put the rest of the stuff in a landfill somewhere, and if they're not allowed to do that, they'll typically ship it overseas to another country that doesn't have strict regulations on their environment, and then those same batteries and used parts and broken screens and mercury and everything else get put into a landfill somewhere else. So that's the downside of it, and it's all packaged, it's all sold as this is good for the environment. You should recycle this stuff. But if you see what the end of that recycling chain is, a lot of times it's much different than what we expect. So that's unfortunate. 1001 noisy cameras. Hey, what's going on? I was just watching Everyday Dad's live stream yesterday, and I heard him talking about 1001 noisy cameras, and I have a question for him I have to remember to ask. Let's see, all these variations are confusing. That is correct. Math is hard. Not my subject either. Do a lot of them end up at various eBay refurbishers? If you're talking about recycling, I don't know. That's a good question. To the best of my knowledge, it all depends obviously on where you go. And when we deal with manufacturers, they don't always tell us exactly what they're going to do when they recycle a phone. We do know that Apple has a brand new machine that strips phones down even faster than the old one that they used to have. But the sad thing about it is, and the thing is, you know, the public responds very positively to this kind of thing. It's like, wow, they have this machine that's going to recycle my phone. Great for the environment. Let's do that, blah, blah, blah. And in fact, what's happening a lot of times is that these phones can be repaired easily. You can take your phone and replace the charge port, the battery, the camera. You know, there could be something else wrong with it, and it's a working phone again. It can go back out into the public or be sold or, you know, used as a replacement device. But many times that doesn't happen, and I think that a lot of people just assume that it does, and it's not necessarily. Let's see. Yes, the return exchange traded in phones. Yeah, it's really hard to say. You know, unfortunately, I suspect that some of them do, but that quite a few don't. In fact, I was just listening to someone talk recently about how they worked at a recycling company, and we used to have people that bring stuff in all the time, and for the most part, they would. You know, they would strip out anything that really was still working, if possible. But in many cases, depending on the model, how old the phone was, it would. Unfortunately, with this situation, you know, we had a guy that came in and kind of told us a story, and he said, yeah, you know, a while ago they passed some laws that prevented us from sending these old lithium-ion batteries or, you know, sending any kind of phones that contain these materials to a dump, basically, where they just bury them in the ground. So, which, you know, is legit. You know, we shouldn't be burying this stuff because someday it's going to leak into the water supply. We may be far gone, you know, long gone by then, but the future of the human race depends on having clean water. So if we have all this crap leaking down into the ground, we're not going to have that anymore. And He said, you know, the sad thing about it is, and this is a few years ago, was that since we can't just bury that stuff here, we send it, we put it on a boat, it goes to China, into a somewhat undeveloped area where they go through and they pick out a few of the usable parts, and then they throw this stuff into a landfill there. Well, a couple of years ago, China said, yeah, enough of that. We need to clean up the air. We need to clean up the environment. And they stopped accepting that waste from us. So I don't know where the stuff goes anymore. It would be nice to find out, and then it would probably be disappointing as well. Tweet from EFF. 5% of cell phones are returned and contractually bound not to be resold in the same market. They have to be unlocked to be exported to other markets. Otherwise, they become e-waste. Wow. Hey, Greg, this is a tweet. If you have a link, see if you can post it. And if not, I'll look that up and try to add that afterwards. That's interesting and good to know. I'd like to have a source for that so we can document it, you know. Silver lining. Our grandkids may get superpowers from the lithium in the water. They might get a lot of things. At the rate it's going now, who knows? In any case, I want to show you guys this because, as you know, I am somewhat concerned about the future. Again, a lot of this stuff we won't be around for by the time it happens, but at some point, I believe that if a technology exists, it's going to be used. Obviously, there's going to have to be someone who decides whether it's used for good or evil, or, you know, is honest or uses it to profit from in some way, and may or may not care about other people, the environment, you know, anything like that. So here's the strange thing. Sports teams are using facial recognition to use more about their fans. Now, right off the top, I think that most people's reaction to this will be, well, if you attend a sporting event, you are going to abide by their rules and regulations. Obviously, you know, if they tell you not to bring something in, you can't do that. You have to behave yourself while you're there. If it's no smoking, you can't smoke, and etc. You know, if there's no alcohol, you can't bring alcohol and that kind of thing. That we understand that. And for the most part, if you're in a public place, we know that while it may not be considered polite, you know, people can take your picture. If you're in a public place, it is completely legal, and this is where we really see the line between what a corporation can get away with versus what an individual can get away with. So if I'm out in public and someone walks up and takes my picture, I may have a problem with that. You know, I understand that it's completely within their rights to do so because I am in a public place, but I might still feel that is being invasive. You know, that for them to take my picture, what are you doing sticking a camera in my face, right? Yet every day I'll drive by traffic cameras that are absolutely going to be taking photos of my car through my windshield, getting my picture. I know that because in order for me to operate a motor vehicle, I am subject to the laws that govern the roads and the freeways and the highways and everything else, right? And the bridges and all that stuff. So I understand that, and I'm cool with it. But we see more and more as we progress, especially with technology, that companies are able to take your picture, big companies, governments, sporting events, you know, all these different entities that there are people behind them, but we see the face of a corporation. We see the face of NFL or NBC for that matter, or Apple or Samsung or any other business that you think of. That is seen as an entity. So there's no one really to get upset with. There's no person sticking a camera in your face when it's actually a company or a corporation that's doing it. So we tend not to see much of a pushback from the public, you know, in these situations. Whereas if you were at a sporting event and someone stuck a camera in your face and started taking your picture, you might be upset about that. You know, there are a certain number of people who would be offended by that, who wouldn't like it, who would tell the guy to get the camera out of their face, and really probably could get much worse than that. But we're facing a situation right now where some sports teams are using facial recognition as people enter, you know, whatever the arena is or whatever the facility is where the games are taking place. They're taking your photo while you're in the audience. We know we've got these cameras. When you go to a ball game, you see other people on camera. You know, that you just kind of understand that's part of the deal, right? You show up, you pay for your ticket, you go inside, and you know that there's a good chance there. In fact, a lot of people want to be on TV, so they're like, yeah, you know, send the camera over here. But if there was a single person doing that, you would probably feel differently about it. And this is why I always wonder where this is going to lead, because we're going to start with sporting events, and eventually, outside of having things like traffic cameras, which are obviously, you you know, they're for a reason, and there are a lot of good arguments for why we should have cameras in public, right? There are a lot of crimes that take place that we want to be able to track down who committed those crimes, and we want to see, you know, if someone is kidnapped, where are they? You know, there's all sorts of reasons that we should do this. And when we look at it as the government doing it, that's one thing. But when we start looking at private companies, when we start looking at corporations that are starting to do the same thing, even though this isn't technically a public place, you know, a lot of the laws that govern the public will still apply when you're at a sporting event. So once I believe that we little by little say it's okay for large companies to stick cameras in our faces wherever we go, you know, ultimately that leads to a surveillance state that is happening through a privately held corporation, you know, through privately held corporations, not through governments, but through businesses. If they're able to get to the point where businesses can put cameras up in public places and just start photographing everything you do, who reads what, and by the way, the purpose that they're putting behind this is that they want to see what to sell to their fans. Okay, so all these. Let's see. Here's part of it here. It says they're taking pictures to solve problems. So what they want to find out is, for example, they're trying to sell advertising to someone who's going to spend money with them, and they're saying that a lot of people have a stereotype of a baseball fan being an older person who isn't going to spend money on their products, and they're saying the truth is not that, and we want to be able to show people, we want to show these advertisers on camera who their audience is, you know, who they could potentially be selling to, which obviously from a business standpoint makes sense. They're, you know, certainly going to be security applications. This is going to say, hey, we see a potential problem, although that could be a rabbit hole to go down there, right? You know, right off the bat. How do you look at someone and say this could be a potential problem, right? That's going to be a sticky one, so I'm not going to touch it. But also things like what type of music to play. Again, a very odd angle to come out and say we're going to put cameras on our audience and use that to decide what type of music we play. What is that supposed to mean? I don't get that. Like, would you look at a group of people and say, hey, they probably like this kind of music? Maybe. I mean, I could think of some situations where that might apply, but you know, with the overcompensation for political correctness that we have, that we live in right now, it seems like this would be inviting people to complain about you stereotyping them based on their appearance. You look at a group and say, oh, they're going to like this music. What does that mean? I don't know. I just see this opening up a huge can of worms. But the fact of the matter is, it is taking place. Like, it's happening. This particular article was referencing a South African company, I believe. Yeah, so it's called FanCam. But later on in the article, they say that they're already doing business with some teams in the U.S. Let's see if I can find it here. Where was it? Fans are going to increasingly count on leagues and teams to let them know how the data is used. NYU's Eigel. What privacy is being sacrificed for, and is it in the right hands? And this, friends, is my main concern. When we say, you know what, so Facebook gets to see what I'm doing, so Google gets to see what I'm doing, so they get to sell advertising for products that are suited to me, okay, whatever. But at some point, you have to question, and we have to remember that there are people behind these companies, and those people have access to that information. And for whatever they choose to use it, you know, for whatever purposes they choose to use it, I don't think it's getting a lot of attention right now. And I believe that over time, eventually people will say, hey, you know what, this isn't okay. I'm not okay with that. But it tends to happen gradually. You know, we'll do it at a couple sporting events. We'll do it here. We'll do it there. And probably next thing you know, you have cameras installed outside your house, which, again, can be used for the good of the public and for your own good. But they can also be used for the wrong reasons. So, again, just another thing I'm going to be following here because I think it's weird. Let's go to the comments here real quick. Cannot post links. Okay, Greg, I will find a link, and let's see, we're at 2:43, so I'll jump in after the stream. And by the way, I forget to say this every time. For anyone who watches the replays, I do add timestamps down in the video description. So if you see a title on this video and you say, wow, that looks interesting, and it's not the first thing that I'm talking about, at least within about 24 hours, I'll come back and add those links so you can just jump to that conversation, you know, and see what the comments say and see what we're talking about. And my idea is that we should be able to do the same thing as I'm adding these links into the chat. So hopefully that'll work out. But I will look that up Greg, and see if I can get that link in there for you. Can you send it to his Twitter account? Yeah, you can tweet that to me, absolutely, guys, and I will... You send it to my Twitter account. Awesome. So let's do that. Let's go to Mike's Twitter account here on a separate window. If I can. Can I do that? Boy, this is going to be tricky. Let's go here, and let's go to my Twitter account so I can grab that link. I keep forgetting I can do this stuff like in real time, which is awesome. This is why I love it. All right, here we go. So right to repair. Is this it right here? No. Did you send it to me, I'm guessing? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how to use Twitter, guys. Sorry. Okay, so here is computer programs unlocking 5%. Okay, so here's the tweet from EFF. Electronic Frontier for the future, I think is what it is. 5% of cell phones are being turned in. Okay, so all right, so I have to follow up with him because I don't see a link there, and I always like to show where this information comes from so no one can say, hey, you're spreading misinformation. I do not want to do that, but I'll check it out. The stream went offline at this point for some reason, so we will have to come back and talk about this last topic a little more later in the week. But we've only got about 12 minutes left, so I did want to go over this briefly. A lot of you are already aware that Linus Sebastian, who runs Linus Tech Tips, which would be great to have on here, although he is understandably a very busy guy, so I will see if I can get in touch with him. On all his contact information says business contacts only, everything else will be ignored, so we'll see. I'd like to have him or a representative from his company come on so that we could have a discussion about this. I think this is good to hear about. This is definitely a PR nightmare for Apple because his channel is so huge. So if you don't already know the story, these guys were repairing, or they were tearing down an iMac Pro, and when they went to reinstall the screen, they damaged the screen, and someone on their end thinks that there may be more damage to the computer than just the screen. It might also be a fault on the logic board now that was caused by improper installation or disassembly, one of the three, who knows. But the fact of the matter is he went to Apple and asked them to repair it, and they told him, obviously it's out of warranty, you've taken it apart, you've tampered with it, etc., blah, blah, blah. We know that story. So he offered to pay the out-of-warranty repair fee because no one has the screen. You know, he couldn't get a hold of the replacement part, so obviously you can't repair it. Now, I am questioning, and I understand the idea behind this, which is valid. We need to hold manufacturers responsible for all sorts of stuff. My question is this: if your display is damaged and your logic board is damaged, you're not starting with a lot. You know, probably he probably intended to address the logic board issue once he could see what was coming up on the screen, but the screen is damaged. And Apple, not necessarily, I don't know if we want to say being uncooperative, but certainly not giving him a good option because they don't have anyone apparently at this point in time who is certified to work on this particular device. So they're selling a computer, if I understand this correctly, and some of these computers, and this one I want to say is worth about 10 grand. These things go all the way up to $30,000 apparently when they've got, like, you know, the fully loaded, everything you can imagine included in it. So we're not talking about a small investment here. We're talking about a considerable amount of money for a device that at this point in time is pretty useless, you know, if you don't have a display. Can they use a iMac screen and replace it themselves? Also, why did they tell Apple that they try to replace it themselves? Now, I don't know why they told Apple that, and there's a lot of speculation as to the purpose of this video, so I'm going to get to that in a minute because I want to take a look here down in the comments. So we know that a while back, this same channel did something where they took something out of an Amazon store. I think it was like a Whole Foods that's owned by Amazon, or they took something off the shelf, put it back, then took it off again, and ended up walking out of the store without paying for it. So, you know, obviously, anyone who makes YouTube videos is hoping that people will watch their videos. So we see people do a variety. We see a lot of different behaviors that we wouldn't normally expect people to undertake, probably for the purpose of driving traffic to their channel, which, you know, can go overboard sometimes. If you watch a lot of the prank videos nowadays, you'll see what I mean. But I don't, you know, from what I've seen of this channel, it's not like they're really out there, you know, it's like they're doing things that people would be interested in watching because it's interesting to watch, you know. So the thing about it is that, yes, as Greg stated, you cannot buy this screen from a third party. There is no other manufacturer that makes a display for this machine, okay? And that's, we get that, right? So if you already understand, you buy something from Apple, you can't just go down to Walmart and buy a replacement screen, or you can't go online and order the screen from somewhere else. If something happens to it, you have to go back to Apple. Why did he tell them? I don't know, but I don't really think that's at issue. If you said someone got upset during a sporting event at my house and threw threw a remote control through the display on my computer, that's going to be different. But the bottom line is this: it's broken. I'm willing to pay for it, which is what he said. It's not under warranty, obviously. If this is physical damage, they're never going to replace the screen for you because it got cracked. If the screen was defective, if there was a problem with it, that was Apple's fault, obviously they should be held accountable to remedy that under warranty. But this screen was not under warranty. It was clearly removed from the device and accidentally dropped. I mean, he's got a video on his channel where he shows them dropping the display as they're installing it. So we know who's at fault, and he has not tried to mislead anyone, misrepresent that. He's gone to Apple and said, look, we took this thing apart, we broke it, we know it's not under warranty, we want to pay you to fix it. And Apple said, we can't. That is my allegedly, I got to keep remembering to say allegedly. So allegedly, Apple said we can't fix it, and no one has yet been trained to fix this particular iMac, allegedly. So you're basically out of options. So you have this $10,000 piece of machinery that, it could have just as easily fallen off his desk, right? What if it got knocked over while you were moving some things around, which is something I would do. I try not to do. But, however it reached this state, there really should be 2 responses from any manufacturer, within a reasonable amount of time. If we're talking about something that was made 20 years ago, good luck, okay? My automobile, I bought a car, and not 5 years later, I could hardly find replacement parts for it. This happens. This is one of the things that, it just happens, and it really will generally take a class action suit in order to get a recall done on something that has a defective part. And if you can't find that part, that's a good argument to say, look, I need to replace this. It's a problem with this device. I can't find the replacement part anywhere, therefore there should be a recall to replace it. But we're talking about something that wasn't defective. We're talking about something that was damaged, accidental or intentional. Doesn't really matter. It's outside of warranty. You go back to Apple, and let's imagine that he had just knocked this thing off of the desk, it fell on the floor and broke the screen, and Apple now says, well, we realize that we sell this, but we don't have any remedy for your situation. There is no one who's authorized to repair this thing. Now, obviously, Apple has access to this screen. They can buy the part for the replacement, and my understanding is they said, great, let us buy the part. We will replace it ourselves, like we do all the time, right? We buy a phone screen, we install it in the phone, problem solved in 20 minutes or less. You don't have to make an appointment. You don't have to come back next Tuesday. You come in, you get your phone fixed, you're done. That works for some people. Other people would prefer to deal directly with the manufacturer or the dealer or whatever you want to call it. That's fine. But when he asked Apple to sell it to someone else so that he could have them repair it, one, they would only sell to an authorized Apple repair facility. Number 2, if that repair facility is not authorized for this repair, which no one is apparently, they cannot offer the service, nor can they resell the part to the customer who's looking for that replacement. So you're basically stuck. Okay, and if they did, they would lose their Apple certification, whatever that stands for. So as I gather here from this article and from watching the video on his channel, they're really stuck here. They took this thing apart, and I really don't think that's the question, whether or not they tampered with it. The question is, if you end up in a situation like this and you break your laptop, is Apple going to say, well, sorry, we don't have the parts, nor do we have anyone capable of fixing the problem? And then, oh, thank you. John Cassidy said, congratulations on 50,000. Thank you so much. I am excited, and it took me a long time to get here, so I really appreciate that. Let's see. Does Apple fix any laptop screens, and don't they charge so much that it isn't worth fixing? My understanding is let me back up on the comments, guys. I think I missed a bunch of stuff here, and I want to include these at the end. I got to say, I believe that this conversation will come up again on Thursday because I'm not going to have nearly enough time to go through the entire thing, but I do want to address the questions for sure. Can they just use an iMac screen and replace it themselves? Also, why did they tell? Okay, so we did that one. Thing is, you cannot get an iMac screen other than from Apple. 5.8 million subscribers. They will do some traffic events. Yeah, some traffic events. Oh, hey, Piano with Sam, how's it going? And thank you for the congratulations. I'm excited. I should have called this one Celebration of 50,000 Subscribers, but I did that in advance because I was pretty confident it was coming soon, but you just never know when it's going to hit. So finally got there. Yes, Apple knows how to make money. 1001 noisy cameras, Apple bag of money, Apple bag of money. That's really all you need to say, I think, and most people get it, but that's true. So let's see, they release products before someone is trained for repair said device. Exactly. Now this is the real problem that I see, is that you're selling something that even you, what happens if you have Apple Care on this product? Let's say that he had purchased Apple Care with this device, broke the screen, brought it in. Do they just swap it out for a new one? Because I would imagine if no one's certified to work on this device yet, which, I mean, how complicated can it be? We've seen the inside of Apple computers and phones and everything else, tablets. How much different is this particular model that nobody can work on? And I don't understand. And obviously, they did a teardown on their channel. So the screen being broken was just clearly an accident. It wasn't that they damaged it during removal. It slipped out of someone's hand, okay? So it wasn't like they were doing the disassembly wrong or they were putting it back together wrong. It was a accident that happened. He just dropped it. That was it, plain and simple. And it sounds like from the video, there was some noise in the background that might have startled the guy. But in any case, these things happen. But to sell something that you can't repair and then to spend money to lobby against our right to repair our own stuff, if that doesn't spell we want a monopoly on every product we sell to our customers, I don't know what does. Allegedly, whatever. Yeah, it's crazy for a flagship product. Exactly. It's one thing to have that with a $200 Chromebook or a Windows PC. Yeah, and point taken. And at the same time, I think that what this is going to lead to is obviously a policy from Apple and potentially a legal process that says that if you sell a device within the United States, or maybe it'll be on a state-by-state basis, you know, if you sell a device in the state of California, you must offer a repair option of some sort for a certain period of time. And I don't know that we really have, I don't know what the current legislation is, but we need to know. And we do need to protect consumers. You know, a lot of people say, well, just don't buy Apple products if you don't like what they're doing. But at a certain point, there's so much small print that we can't all really see what the terms and conditions are of our purchase. So we need that either to be spelled out clearly and represented by the manufacturer as such, or we need to have some sort of recourse or some sort of remedy for when we end up in a situation like this. I mean, think about the person who dropped $30,000 on this type of computer and it gets damaged and they need their data from that computer. They don't want to go swap it out for another one and turn over their intellectual information that's stored on the hard drive. They want this screen to be repaired so that they can recover whatever is being stored on that device. And Apple says, sorry, we don't have anyone that can fix it. This is insanity. I would assume that Apple is probably, as we speak, training people to work on this device so they can fix this situation and go back and say, hey, here's what we're going to do. And, you know, hopefully in the next week or two, we'll know exactly how that turns out. But this is crazy. It does not make sense. And I would argue that, and I agree with you, noisy cameras, if I can just call you that, or 1001, I agree with you. And at the same time, for some people, spending $200 on a Chromebook is a big deal. So, you know, for that customer who might have worked a very long time to save up enough money to make that happen, when their device gets broken, they should have some sort of option, right? As far as repair goes, I would think. Greg said, Linux may be getting Louis Rossmann up to Canada to see if he can't fix it. Problem is no schematics for the device, nor open board view files for the iMac model. Yeah, that will be tricky. And of course, Louis would probably be the person who is most familiar with MacBook board layouts. And I would assume that, you know, in many cases, you can kind of put two and two together and see that a lot of Apple's design is similar, although they rearrange the components, and you know he would be the man for the job. The question is, where are they going to get a display for this thing? Because one, if you don't have a display, it's going to be difficult to tell what's going on with the machine. Maybe they could use does this thing have an HDMI output? I would certainly hope so, because at least you would want to be able to see what's going on as you're performing this repair. You plug it in, are we seeing different error messages and so forth. And I'm going to have to wrap this up pretty soon because it sounds like they're going to start doing yard work outside, but right on time. But I think we're going to have to revisit this on Thursday, no matter if it's just me or we have a guest on. I certainly want to go a lot deeper on this topic, and you will probably have some updates at that point. One cannot deviate from the prescribed steps as outlined in Apple repair methods. Otherwise, cattle prods come out. Yeah, I would imagine. It's not really the same, but do you have consumer laws in the U.S.? We do have consumer laws, Piano, but they vary from state to state, and they're certainly going to be different than the laws in Europe and in the UK. And so we have some laws, and I don't know how they're going to work into this. I really need to have an attorney that I can just consult with for my YouTube stream, so I can say, hey, here's what happened with Apple, and better answer those questions. And guys, I am so short on time. What I really want to do, and I did not design this to leave anyone hanging, but I really want to go through and analyze the comments on this article. So if you want to do so in the meantime, feel free to follow this link. Did I put the link up here? If I didn't, let me add the link again. And the crazy thing is, of course, as you can imagine, there are going to be people on both sides of the argument. There are going to be people on Apple's side and people against Apple saying all sorts of crazy stuff. But the ones that get me the most are the dismissive comments like, well, he shouldn't have opened it up. It's his fault. Game over. That's it. There's no argument. And they don't even care, about the controversy or discussing or arguments. It's just, oh, well, you opened up your iMac? Well, that's it. Your warranty's voided. You're out of luck. So if you buy a $10,000 piece of equipment and you damage it and there is no replacement parts for it, tough luck. Go buy another one, for whatever happened, accidental or not. And to me, that is that mechanism that I mentioned earlier in the stream of human nature saying, I've got so many things to deal with right now. If I can come up with a fast solution, whether it's right or wrong, if I can come up with a decision quickly based on something I heard at some point along the line, I can dismiss this issue and not have to deal with it. And I believe that is a big problem that we have when it comes to what some people will call the whole fanboy effect, is that if you buy into something, if you decided that you're on Team A or Team B or Team C or whatever it is, that company, that person, that team, whoever it is that candidate can do no wrong. And if someone brings up a legitimate argument that conflicts with your belief, it's easy to say, well, one time I heard this, therefore I'm not going to listen to anything else you have to say. And it's crazy the number of people that are doing that. So let me take this off the screen. I am going to... Whoops, that's my old Uber picture. So I am going to wrap this up because I didn't want to keep you guys late, and I really wanted to go a lot further into this, and then the stream got interrupted, so that sucks. But we'll come back, talk about this again Thursday. I'm not sure about Thursday whether or not we have a guest confirmed, so a lot of these things happen very last minute. I wish it wasn't that way, but I'm definitely working on some interesting guests that I think you're all going to enjoy. Let's wrap up the comments if I have missed any here. Especially with some MacBooks have soldered SSDs. Yeah, that's another crazy thing. Thing is that Linus issue has been going on since January 2018. Yeah, I want to say... he actually shows a calendar in his video, and it does seem like it was the end of January or February when it first started. Some people have to use Apple products because of the nature of their work, school, group, project. Thank you. Thank you for that. And this is a great point. This is one of the things that we run into. And when people have this whole argument of, well, if you don't like it, don't buy from them. No, that goes right out the window when you come to the realization that some people are required by someone they're involved with to use this particular device. Some people only have one ISP. Some people really don't have a choice in the matter. And that's where we have to say that, free enterprise notwithstanding, we have to look at something that becomes a monopoly or something that becomes a mandate where if you have to have it, you don't have any choice in the matter, then we really need to work on protecting consumers from being taken advantage of and losing money because of a situation like this. So, yeah, we'll see how it turns out. But definitely want to discuss this more. Let's see. There's a link. 1231 comments and rising over there. Yeah, so that comment section, hey, if you have time, feel free to jump on there and let them know what you think. Obviously the thing about comments is that they tend to, well, anyone can make them, right? So you'll see a lot of crazy stuff on here, and that's what was really disappointing to me. But, by now I should be used to it. everyone has a voice, and whether you agree with them or not, that's part of what makes the country great, right? All right, so I'm going to let you all go. I'll be back on Thursday for sure. Next 6 p.m. on Thursday. Again, next Monday, 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And until then, everyone, have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon.